When listening to music for pleasure rather than research, what genres and artists do you enjoy? Do you listen to anything other than classical music?
Well, it's interesting. I'm so inundated with the music that I am actually studying at the time that I am studying it, that in fact I really only concentrate on the music that I'm working on. I tend not to listen to music that I would enjoy just like so. It's always a part of a study, or it's part of some kind of something I'm learning about a composer or something like that. And it's not that I don't enjoy music. I very much enjoy music, and I very much enjoy the art form, but it really, it takes over my brain in such a way where I can't exactly stay away from trying to understand it, how it was composed, but that's the enjoyment for me. And then hopefully I can absorb some of that and give it over to other people when I'm making music myself.
Well, thank you. So I have another question here. This one is from PC. How do you prepare yourself to take on the role of these iconic composers?
Torture. But beyond the torture, it's all about study, it's all about knowledge. You have to really know, especially if you're playing. It's not something that you can fake, but the most important thing is that I actually write the text to this with the help of the audience, because you can only, when it's certainly a one-man show, you can only do so much on your own. You have to see what is actually being reacted to and what actually works, and the audience is responsible for that in extreme. Preparing is all about really knowing. It has to do with the standard biographies that we all know, the standard information that we all know, and then going a step further and then seeing about the things that we don't know or aren't particularly obvious, and finding ways to get at that information. And in the case of Bernstein, in the case of Berlin, family members are alive. Even in the case of the Gershwin, family members are still alive that were able to share things that people didn't know, and I'm able to infuse the character with that, either directly or as a subtext. In terms of after that, you have to know the music. So there's a lot of time spent studying all the music. Now I'm preparing my next character, and the premiere is a year from now, and in fact most of the time is spent studying the music, seeing what music can be chosen to advance the story, and what music is effective in a theatrical context, because just because it works musically doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be really effective in a theater storytelling situation. So there's a lot of that. But all it comes down to is actually studying and knowing. And after that, if you're really prepared, then you engage your acting abilities, your storytelling abilities, the rest of the stuff you spent your life doing, and your imagination. And that's how you bring it to life for the people. But it really is all about preparation. I always suppose great art is, you don't get away with just being a little talented and throwing it together. That I don't think works.
How many hours a day would you say you spend playing?
Playing is different than preparing, because not all practice is done at the piano. I'm sure I'm at the piano 4 or 5 hours a day. But other than that, there's a lot of practice that goes on by studying music and studying other recordings. YouTube is a great, fascinating thing now, because so many people from all over the world have made recordings and information available that previously wasn't available to me or others as a student my age. You know, I'm 47 now, so when I started going to advanced music studies, I was 13, in a university program, you know, the best we had were big records. And you couldn't, and information, book information and music scores, which forced the imagination to be really industrious. However, the important thing is when you can see other people doing things, you can learn a whole lot about what is possible, what isn't. And of course, because there's such a wonderful history now of so much stuff on film and committed to recording, we can really assess how over the years things have changed and what we have done to enhance that.
Thank you. So our next question comes from R. Snell. What is your dog's name? I saw him or her at your performance on 12/26 at the La Jolla Playhouse. The dog was very well behaved during your rehearsal. Does the dog travel with you?
The dog doesn't always travel with me, but he came to the La Jolla Playhouse as a visit. He lives in France, where we have our home. His name is Leo, and he's a boy. And I actually had his uncle for 14 and a half years, who did travel with me everywhere. And then when we lost his uncle, I cried for days. I'm never going to have a dog ever again. And then 2 days later, I called the breeder and said, do you have anybody from his line? And it so happens that he was having a nephew. So I immediately adopted that nephew, and he's a black standard poodle, and I love him very much. We all love him very much. He's very much a theater dog. He made his debut, in fact, at the Geffen Playhouse when he was born 5 years ago. He came on New Year's Eve and was passed around like a little baby. He was 3 months old, and ever since then he loves going to the theater, but now he spends most of his time at home in Europe.
Wonderful. So we have a question from Debbie. What kind of music do you enjoy off the stage?
You know, it again is really music that I can study. It's good music. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's pop, rock, hip hop, classical, as long as it has something that's interesting musically, that there's information that is somehow stimulating, that uses all the parts of music, absorbing what's around culturally, the color of sound, rhythm, you know, all the mechanisms of music. If it's sort of deaf to those kinds of things, then I don't think I last long. But if it somehow is thoughtful and interesting, and of any sort, it can be, you know, hard rock, it can be garage band, whatever it is, as long as it has intention and it speaks and is something kind of new, it's fun.
Thank you. So this question is from Tim. What challenges do you face when putting on a solo show?
Lots of loneliness. You have no choice but to spend a lot of time alone. You come alone, you leave alone, you study alone. Then you have the wonderful audience that is there to take part with you, and you tell that story, and it must be fresh every night. You have an immense responsibility that every night it has to be as good as it can be. And not as good as it can be for you, but as good as it can be. So, you know, people paying hard-earned money for their tickets, you can't phone it in. There's no such a thing. Not to mention you have nobody on the stage to save you. But other than that, it's about focus, it's about concentration, and that of course takes all your energy. And entire days are spent producing, you know, running theater business, studying. So it's a never-ending job, and I think the hard thing about it is that it doesn't stop, that it always goes on, and you have to always study, and you have to always maintain your mechanism. Take it very seriously. There's no glamour in it. A lot of people think, oh, it's fun, it's glamorous, oh wow, people applaud. When they applaud, it's the cue, okay, go home to sleep for a few hours so you can get ready to give it your all the next day. But the hardest part of the preparation is really, strangely, because I enjoy the rest, is the food part. It's very hard to figure out when and what to eat 8 times a week, even if you work with a nutritionist. It doesn't matter. It's so hard to figure out how to manage that. And so eating is always a challenge. And that I'm a bit of a foodie makes it even worse. So, you know, you're constantly on a diet and constantly miserable. So there's that. But the joy of performing in the music and sharing the stories, but in particular, the music and the stories are what keeps me going.
Great. So we have another question from Justin. You've been to so many cities with your shows. Do you have a favorite city? Are you able to get out and experience them, sightseeing, local restaurants? This kind of ties into what you just mentioned about food and being a foodie. Well,
you know, the local restaurants can only happen on Monday because the rest of the time you can't eat before the show. Won't bode well for the stage. But, you know, the city that I'm in is the favorite city. Right now I'm in Mountain View and I'm discovering it. And there's all kinds of things that are around that are really spectacular. It's a great place, and it's quite a bit different than if one would be in San Francisco or Berkeley, where I spend a lot of time. It's got its own wonderful charm. You know, Stanford is just a few miles away, so one can go there. Fabulous restaurants all over. What I have discovered, I did take myself with my director, Trevor, to, we went to Alexander's, The Sea by Alexander, something like this. Really fabulous restaurant. Not far from here, really great experience. So one realizes that this is a foodie place. But other than that, one can investigate interesting things that are in each place. You know, we were in Phoenix, so off we went to Sedona. You know, I mean, the things that you can see around this country are miraculous, but I really think that the thing that is most interesting is meeting the people. Everywhere you go, you get a different sense of where people live and what's important to them. And What is wonderful, though, in terms of Irving Berlin, in this character in particular, is that no matter where you are in the country, they find the same things funny, they find the same things heartrending, you know, they're moved by the same things. So there is very much so a collective. And when I sing with the audience, and they sing too, you know, you have a bunch of strangers singing White Christmas or God Bless America together, you really realize about the fabric of this country, that no matter what the tapestry looked like, it is all part of one particular fabric that is very colorful.
Yeah, music definitely ties us all together.
That's for sure.
So this question is from Bob G. Did your mother love chocolate?
No. Maybe, I don't know. But my mother left us, passed away when I was a kid. She left us of cancer. I mean, these things happen. You know, I was very young. I was 13, she was 35. But Hershey was actually after the Yiddish name of my grandfather, which was Herschel, and the diminutive Hershey. And he died 3 years before I was born. And so my parents thought fit to name me after him, which is, of course, the tradition. And that's how it became Hershey, and it stayed. And at some point, I mean, my official name on my passport is Howard Hirsch, but I didn't want to be a Howard. I don't know. I mean, Howard's a nice name, but it wasn't me. And I was Hershey since I'm a kid, so Hershey stuck, and that's what it is.
Well, it's definitely unique. Krista asks, which historical figure would you next like to play on stage?
Well, I will be playing the next historical figure. Well, I'll be doing two figures that are coming up other than Berlin. There will be a Los Angeles appearance of Leonard Bernstein. Well, there will be a Berlin at the Pasadena Playhouse, and there will be another one of Leonard Bernstein, which is a show that I created some time ago that will actually spend a number of years doing again, along with Berlin and other things, because we're coming up on the 100th anniversary of Leonard Bernstein's birth. So there will be a return appearance in Los Angeles before I head to New York. Well, I will be appearing there in this piece. I did play that in New York at Town Hall 2 years ago in a worldwide broadcast by the WFMT radio network, and it seemed there was interest, so Leonard Bernstein is going back. But the next character, which will have his debut in the January of 2017, is the character of Tchaikovsky. In fact, on my piano right now is a bunch of Tchaikovsky music because I've been steadfastly studying every day. There is so much to learn, and it is so beautiful. But the incredible thing about Tchaikovsky, aside from the music, is the story that surrounds him, his life, and what happened to him, how, when he died. It's a fascinating story that people really don't know.
Well, it sounds very interesting. I hope you bring it up to the Bay Area soon for us to see it here.
Thank you.
So our next question comes from Chris Dillon. How do you think about the really technical and fast apprecios, I hope I pronounced that correctly, pattern run sections of a piece? Here comes the fast part I really worked on.
Arpeggios. And, you know, they're just, you know, those kind of, you know, these things. Well, the most important thing is that one must study them. Chopin always gave us a very good study, you know, with arpeggio study, that you should start your day, every day, back and forth with arpeggios, you know? So you start with your diminished arpeggios, and then you go up and so on and so forth, and then eventually you do your majors and your minors, but you need to study it every single day. And when you get to this passage, whatever that passage is, while you're playing and performing, the secret is don't panic, don't get nervous, don't go, oh my God, here comes an arpeggio, what now? Am I gonna make it? And you know, it's kind of walking the, no, you've done your homework, you know how it goes, and then you launch into it musically. That's the secret of playing fast and playing artistically. You never do a passage just to do a passage. It always must be a beautiful part, you know, it always must be a very beautiful part of the music that you are making. And as long as you do that, speed is of no consequence. You can't get into your head about speed. And the other important thing when it comes to that is relaxation. People think, and this is a big mistake with all musicians, that the tenser you are, the more you will hit. No, in fact, it's exactly the opposite. Relaxation, you know, your fingers must be strong, they must be like steel, but relaxation physically in order to create a beautiful tone and be in control is the most important thing. Doesn't mean flimsy, but complete relaxation in your body, in your upper body, and in your core and everything, so that you have control over everything you do, and you let the music come through. As many great pianists say, if you are relaxed, you can allow your brain and your ears to connect to your music. And, since it's obviously a question from a pianist, the most important thing is your ear guides everything. Nothing else. The fingers don't do it, the feet don't do it, they just follow instructions. But it's the ear. You imagine what you want to hear and you listen to what you're actually doing, and that will guide the speed of your arpeggio, and it will never fail you. Because if you train your ear to listen, it will always be there. Then you can make a miscalculation and give a clunker like every great pianist does, but that happens.
It's real. It's very real when that happens.
Oh, let me tell you, it's very real, but you know what, you can't, you know, the greatest technicians in the world, even Liszt, and even Beethoven was famous for, well, he was deaf, so he couldn't hear, so he missed the notes anyway. But no, he was famous for actually missing notes, but even Liszt would miss notes, you know. Horowitz misses notes. These are the greatest pianists that ever lived, because if you go at it musically, the intention is not to play like a machine. There are some miraculous people who play every note and never miss. And they're not any less musical, but it's kind of frightening how they do that. But even the greatest miss, because if you take a risk in a musical calculation, your musculature is going to do something that somehow, whoops, you know, happens.
Well, thank you. So our next question is from Kimmy. What is your favorite piece to play, and can you play it?
My favorite piece to play? Well, it depends what I'm playing, you know. This morning I am working on this absolutely stunning Tchaikovsky piece. It's called Dumka, which means little village. It's just so expressive. But that's this morning. Tomorrow it'll be something else. It's got such beautiful color. It really is evocative of an old Russian village. You know, and it just cries Russian. So you can expect to hear this kind of music in the upcoming piece. Oh, it's just heart-rending, it's so beautiful. And also very telling of who that character is. So as I say, what I'm playing is my favorite when I'm playing it, you know.
Well, that was very lovely, thank you. So back to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
We've got one from Brad. Your performances should be videotaped for PBS. Why aren't you recording any of your shows for posterity? I would love to watch the Irving Berlin again, such a poignant tribute to a great American.
That's very kind. In fact, all of them are being recorded and filmed, but we thought we'd wait till I get a little older before I release them, you know. And it's not that they shouldn't be available, and they should be available. And it's also hard when I'm doing so many of them to capture the perfect one. So every time, you know, I do a series in a theater, we'll say we'll film this one, and we're going to release this one in terms of a film on PBS, because we have been asked, and other networks as well. And I sort of feel that I still want to finesse them even more, as finessed as they, you know, there's still something you can do. And eventually I will say, okay, this is the final version. I'll probably do that when it's time for me to say goodbye to that character. We did do this with The Pianist of Willesden Lane, which is also known to very many Gold Star members, starring Mona Golombek, that I wrote and directed, which actually had its opening day in a hit run, already sold run in London at the St. James Theatre. Right tonight was its opening night. We've actually filmed that for broadcast, and I did feel that that was a completed version, and so I directed a picture of that up here, in fact, at Berkeley Rep. And so I am quite thrilled to release that soon. So all these things will happen. It's just a matter of time.
Do you find yourself constantly reworking the shows every time you put on a new production of it?
Not to the degree that one would think. the show's always, you know, even in this one, the director, Trevor Way, who I worked with on this one, we determined that there are certain things that are said twice, you know, so you'll remove a sentence. But that's how refined we are at this point. I mean, early on we're changing things left, right, and center, at least for the first 2 or 3 months. It's always a performance, but until you find the exact balance between character, storytelling, music, acting, and all the rest, it takes time. And there's no, you know, you can't rush it. And if I learned anything over 4,500 performances of solo works over the past 20 some odd years, is that there is just no shortcut. That's the beginning of it. There's no shortcut. And you need to do the work. And in terms of changing it from show to show, we're now at the point where we load in the Irving Berlin, and maybe it's a little refining here and there, but it's very small, because after 300 shows, I sort of know every inch and angle of it. What happens with each performance is if I discover something in the acting, if I discover something in the storytelling, even if it's just a moment that can be altered or massaged a different way to reflect more or less or whatever it is I'm trying to do in the story. But that comes with different audiences. It's interesting, it also comes with different size houses. And I don't mean in terms of numbers. This, where we are here in Mountain View, is a very broad, open proscenium. In fact, it's probably the widest proscenium I've ever done this show. Or maybe La Jolla is. These wide, wide prosceniums. In Chicago, it's a much smaller, compact proscenium, so what you do and where people sit controls the kinds of things you do in that particular space. So you learn things about the character, even just with regard to the space itself. It's a fascinating experience. And the important thing is you always have to keep them fresh, alive, and very, very human. And that's what makes that work.
So every performance really is unique.
Absolutely. It has to be, because if not, then it becomes a, you know, sort of a paint by numbers, you know, oh, well, we did this here and did that there, and it can't be. I have to be telling the story for the first time to that audience every night. And there are technical things and ways to get there, but it has to be that way.
Well, thank you. We have another question from Sam. I wonder whether you realize what an impact your work has on your audience. Has an encounter with or a letter from a fan ever really moved you?
Yeah, there are letters that have been very touching. One came in Chicago. From the setup for the Irving Berlin show is that Irving Berlin is very angry in his old age because carolers come by every year on Christmas Eve singing his songs, and they don't know the first thing about them. And this actually happened. They used to come by every year and used to close his blinds, get lost. And one year he invited them in. And it just so happens that one of the people who came to the show in Chicago sent me a letter and said, I didn't know what I was in for. I thought I was coming a Berlin evening. You know, I was really fond of him and his music, and I know every one of his songs and so on, and only to discover that you were telling my story and that I was one of those people who used to go and sing. That was really moving. And you find connections like that in the audience. When I did the Lincoln play, how I found people in the audience who were relatives of the character that I was talking about. In Chicago, this also happened in Chicago. The great-grandson of the doctor who took care of President Lincoln on the day he was shot came to the audience, and the story was about the doctor who took care about the president. And at the end of the performance, he announced to me that he was the doctor's grandson, and that the diamond his wife was wearing was the diamond stud that the doctor had on him the night that he took care of the president. You know, it's things like that happen. In terms of people being, how do you call it, touched by what I do, I take that with a grain of salt, because it's not me. It's the character that is touching them. I don't use the word vessel because that's a little creepy. I'm just the mechanism, let's just say. I'm the mechanism to tell that story. I'm just a storyteller. But who they are really touched by is Irving Berlin. They are really touched by George Gershwin, and they are really touched by Chopin and Beethoven and Liszt and hopefully Tchaikovsky, the story of Lincoln's doctor. That's who they're touched by. And if they are touched for that, what moves me is that I have been able to illuminate the story of these very important, relevant, historical people who have really changed the world in some way or other.
Well, we're very lucky to have you to do that, since people can no longer see these composers and performers themselves.
It's a nice thing to be able to do. I'm
Thank
grateful
you.
for it.
So we have another question. This is from Tom Resk. Which audiences have the most musical soul? Russian, Polish, American? Impossible to say.
I think it's not audiences and it's not country related. What I do think the most musical soul is anybody who's sensitive, and that can be in any audience. It doesn't, in a modern audience and in an old audience and the audience of yesteryear everywhere around the world. I can tell you that the most singing takes place, the most sort of out and out singing happens to be in Chicago, and it's usually from a group of heart surgeons. I don't know why, but apparently all the doctors in Chicago take part in choral events. So there they like to sing out loud at the theaters. But the most musical soul is anybody who is sensitive. And so many people are. I don't think it's really country related in any which way. And that also brings up an interesting question, if you're Russian, can you only play Russian music if you're Russian? If you're an American, can you only understand American music? I think if you're musical, you can understand any of those things and you can express them. If you are Russian, you can express a certain kind of Russian feeling that it's something you identify with and grew up with. If you're American, you know what it is to me, jazzy and cool. But there's also a great deal of fun with going from country to country and seeing how different countries deal with their this music and process it through their own experience. And it always comes out interesting. There's not one way to do it, and I think that's the exciting part about all of it.
Well, thank you, Hershey. Before we go to our last question, we'd like to announce the winner to our contest that we've been running. This is a winner of a $50 Goldstar gift certificate. And the question that we asked was, I think the next musical luminary Hershey Felder should create a show about is blank. The winner was Sally Noma, and Hershey, would you mind sharing her answer with us?
Sally, congratulations for winning. And it appears that Sally wanted me to create the character of Billy Joel. Now, even a classical guy like me can play this stuff. The only problem is, I'm not sure he'll want to be treated like a dead person while he's still alive. I've been asked for Sondheim, I've been asked for Billy Joel, but I think my favorite one that I was asked for, and there was a Facebook competition about that, or a vote. Who would like to see Hershey Felder next as Lady Gaga? Okay, that one. And a lot of people rang in, and look, she's a massive talent. Now you're seeing all the things that she can actually do, that she can play, she can sing, and she will grow as her career takes on. But thank God she has very many years ahead of her, and doesn't need my help. None of these guys actually need my help. What's nice is to be able to share these stories with people. So congratulations on the Billy Joel thing, but I think he probably wants to stick around for a bit.
Well, thank you. So here is our last question.
Sure.
It's from Ahmed Levy. What advice would you give to kids learning to play a piano? Any do's or don'ts?
Any do's or don'ts learning to play the piano? First, always play for enjoyment, even if it's hard work. Make sure that you enjoy what you're doing. Find the beauty in it. Find the color and make it beautiful. It isn't about just pounding. It isn't just about being slapped on the wrist by your teacher or having to study because it's necessary because so-and-so's taking piano lessons or because your mother or father said so. Always think about the fact that soon, one day, sooner rather than later, you will be able to make music. And there is nothing greater in the world than be able to sit down an instrument and make music. And if you always keep the goal in mind that it's about making music, all the hard work that you have to put in to figure out how to do it and the actual technical work that you do will always serve you, and it'll never let you down. And I think one has very good friends, one has very good family, but the one thing a musician can count on always is their instrument. You know that no matter what you're feeling, you can go there. It may not respond the way you want it to, but it will always respond. And if you know that it really can be a very best friend to you and a way to express everything you have to say throughout your entire life, and to do the study for that, you will have fun with your instrument. And then it's a great way to get girls. So, so there's that, or boys, or whatever you're looking for. It's a great way because people just, wow. There's nothing like taking wood and metal and felt and actually making beautiful sound. There's nothing more magical than that.
Well, thank you. And thank you, Hershey, for joining us here at Coffee with Goldstar. Is there anything that you'd like to share with our audience before we go?
Goldstar is a great thing. It's been a great supporter for all my shows. And the Goldstar audience has been a great support for all the shows. And it's wonderful to read the Goldstar reviews because they're always helpful and always supportive. And for me, in every city, as every theater will tell you, Goldstar is one of the first things I go to make sure that that particular audience gets a chance to see these theater pieces for a price that they can afford.
Well, thank you. And everyone here in the Bay Area, please make sure to come out and see Hershey as Irving Berlin.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.